Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe on this Wednesday. The summer transfer window is officially over. Chelsea have done their business. They completed the last bit of business very late on last night, announcing the loan signing of Saul Niguez from Atletico Madrid. Did a reaction video last night, a short reaction video where we got the here we go from Fabrizio Romano, and we pretty much knew the deal was going to be happening. There was a little bit of stress. I mean, apparently Chelsea took until 2 minutes before the actual deadline to submit the paperwork, so mission impossible stuff, but we got the job done and we now have Saul Niguez as a Chelsea player for the 21-22 season, which is great. I want to speak today about Saul Niguez, a little bit more about him, a brilliant article from The Athletic that I'll link below that I definitely suggest you go and read. It kind of gives you a background into who Saul is as a midfielder, what he could bring to Chelsea's side, and kind of delving in a little bit more to that. I want to speak about Jules Kounde, that deal basically being off during the summer transfer window, reaction to that, and also Callum Hudson-Odoi. But before we get into any of that good stuff, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the uploads on the channel. But let's get into it straight away. Saul Niguez being confirmed as a Chelsea player. Quarter to midnight last night, I believe, was when Chelsea announced it on their Twitter with a pretty cool video. And we have had some new quotes from Saul Niguez speaking about the move going through late, his happiness to be joining Chelsea, being a friend of Kepa Arrizabalaga, and that being sort of a big motivator for him joining the Chelsea squad this season. It's big news, I think it is, for Chelsea. It was a deal, as I said in last night's video, that Chelsea had to get done, just in terms of personnel, just in terms of what we've needed. Now, I can be a little bit frustrated that, as I think I'll get to with the pursuit of Jules Kounde, why this wasn't a bigger priority this summer in terms of it being maybe pursuing one of the longer term targets in Declan Rice or Aurelien Tchouameni is a bit frustrating. We did hear earlier in the window Chelsea speaking to Tchouameni's basically reps, and there's even been some rumours that happened after the Champions League exit for Monaco last week. So there were still some rumours in the final days of the window that Tchouameni could have been an option, but I think we'll have to wait till next season. That should not demean the type of player Saul Niguez is. I think, obviously, from people who've watched him regularly, he hasn't had the best of time at Atletico Madrid, despite, of course, them winning La Liga last year. He hasn't really been a main player for Simeone like he has been in the past, but he's a very experienced midfielder, and I feel this article from The Athletic basically explaining what Saul Niguez could bring to Chelsea, just to take out a little bit of a segment from it. In each formation, Saul should be able to play across any of the roles in that central midfield area, highlighting his versatility to play within different systems. He can play in more of a holding role or as a more advanced midfielder, although would often prefer to be on the left of central midfield on his favoured left foot. He also featured for Simeone as a left wing back, either starting matches there or switching mid-game. So generally, I think the easiest way to describe Saul Niguez from, as I say, people who watch him more regularly than I do, is he is a jack of all trades kind of midfielder, a utility player, which, as I said in last night's video, can kind of seem a little bit demeaning. We look at football now, and I think a lot of obsession over specialist players, but I think being an all-round excellent midfielder in such a key position is, I think, a great trait to have. And you just hope, in terms of the struggles he's had over recent years, coming into a new environment, challenging himself in the Premier League in a competitive midfield area under a coach like Thomas Tuchel, who I think is one of Chelsea's biggest assets just at the moment in terms of tactically and being able to get the best out of players. If Tuchel can reignite some of the brilliance of Saul earlier in his career at Atletico Madrid, Chelsea could be getting one of the moves of the window, one of the unexpected moves of the window, on a loan. And as well, I think it's kind of a win-win situation for Chelsea in terms of the long-term, looking beyond this season. Chelsea haven't really nailed their future down with Saul Niguez. It's a one-season loan with an option to buy for about 30 million. Given the rates of some other midfielders, whether that be Declan Rice or maybe even Tchouameni, if that price was to rise a little bit, and others across Europe, if Chelsea get a really good season out of Saul Niguez and he really fits at Stamford Bridge and Tuchel really likes him, for about 30 million for a player who could be vital to our midfield, you don't know. I think that's brilliant for Chelsea, a win-win situation. If he isn't, and he goes back to Atletico Madrid, we look elsewhere in the window next summer. We've got Billy Gilmour coming back from loan at Norwich at the moment. So, and of course, Declan Rice, Tchouameni, as I said last night. So I think all round, it's what Chelsea needed for the short term. Potentially in the longer term, it could be a brilliant signing, a bit like the Mateo Kovacic situation where we got him on loan from Real Madrid and then we signed him permanently the next summer. So I really hope Sal works. I think, yeah, it's just in terms of the personnel who I think Tuchel would trust over a season. We've spoken about Loftus-Cheek filling in there. Ethan Ampadu's gone on loan to Italy now. You know, we could have looked at other situations there and other people to play in that area. But I think to have a player of Sal's quality and experience in that area to really make a sudden impact in the Premier League, Champions League and other competitions that Chelsea are going to be in. And it's going to be a long, arduous season for Chelsea. So to expect his most free trusted midfielders, Kovacic, Jorginho and N'Golo Kante, to take all of the weight of that over a season, I think would have been a little bit tricky and could have been a risk. So hopefully Sal can bring something that we don't already have in central midfield. So as I say, more of a reaction last night. I'm sure you guys will give me your comments on Saul Niguez becoming a Chelsea player. And many people outside of Chelsea, you know, believe we now have the most rounded squad. You know, we have a squad with all of the areas that needed to be filled have been filled. We look strong in each position, which is great. And hopefully Chelsea can mount a serious Premier League title challenge this season. Let's talk about Jules Kounde, because that was a move that I felt pretty confident a couple of days ago would have been confirmed by now. Of course, it didn't happen. You know, on Monday morning, we got the news from the Athletic and other sources that Sevilla basically pushed up the price for Jules Kounde, and Chelsea were unwilling to make a move for him, and it looked like the deal wasn't going to happen. Very unlikely. And then we had Monchi yesterday, the Sevilla director, coming out in a press conference and basically laying down the gauntlet for Chelsea, saying that if you don't pay Jules Kounde's release clause, he ain't going anywhere. So he didn't go anywhere. I have said consistently that I was a bit baffled this summer of the pursuit of Jules Kounde. Never because of the quality of the player, just in terms of what we needed. And this gets back to priority positions. For me, there were two priority positions this summer for Chelsea, and it was striker, Romelu Lukaku, perfect transfer, and also central midfield, which we now know is Saul Niguez. So happy days, we sorted out the priority positions. I just always wondered why we were willing to spend so much on Jules Kounde and really pursue him that much, when to me, I'm so confident in the current defence. I just never quite felt it was an essential signing. I understand Chelsea's long-term pursuit of Kounde. I understand as a young centre-back, he's very highly rated by people who watch him on a regular basis. My doubts around signing Kounde are whether it was the most vital signing for us to do. You know, I said before deadline day for Football London, if we're only allowed to sign, if we can only sign one player on deadline day, it's not Jules Kounde, because I don't think he transforms what we already have. Liverpool game should have given you enough proof. Down to 10 men: Christensen, Dave, Rudiger, you know, Trevor Chalobah, Thiago Silva, even Kurt Zuma leaving. We could have Reece James playing in that back three at times too this season, as we saw under Tuchel last year. There's so many options there that for me, Kounde could happen in January. It could happen next summer. I was not going to lose any sleep if it didn't happen. Basically, I don't think it's a devastating loss to not have this player joining in the summer transfer window, because I think you should have trust in what we have already, and I think Kounde will be a longer term target for Chelsea. I just kind of think, taking my opinions on whether it's a move Chelsea really need to do in the short term, I think it will happen inevitably, because I just think that the situation of Kounde not being in the Sevilla squad, we've seen this with players before. You know, I look back to Virgil van Dijk with Southampton, not leaving in the summer of 2017, and then the next window he joined Liverpool. Bruno Fernandes, Sporting Lisbon, joining Manchester United. Even to a smaller extent, you know, Ross Barkley was very close to joining Chelsea in the summer of 2017. I believe he got all the way up to a medical, and then the move was called off because I think he had some injury issues, and then we signed him the next window. You do see a knock-on effect, so I would not be stunned an early January transfer prediction, which, you know, is ridiculous, and I know a lot of people were tired of the transfer window, is I think Kounde could be another player we're looking at in January. But for now, I don't think it's a massive loss. I'm confident in the squad we have, and I actually respect the fact that Chelsea, when they hiked up the price for Kounde, said no, we're not budging. You know, this is not a panic buy. We don't need to move quickly for this player. And maybe as a sign that Chelsea, as I wrote in a piece last night, is a sign that Chelsea are learning from their previous transfer mistakes of, you know, waiting a little bit more for players that they actually desire, and not having a big panic on the final day of the transfer window and spending a lot of money that we don't need to on a player that I don't think radically transforms what we have. It's not like Romelu Lukaku in terms of really transforming that centre forward position for us, or Saul Niguez adding the depth and quality needed in central midfield. I just trust the options we have, and I think the biggest winner of Jules Kounde not arriving is Trevor Chalobah. I think Chalobah's got an amazing opportunity to cement his place at Chelsea, or at least get more minutes than any of us could have expected going into the summer. So I think it's not a bad situation. Let me know your opinions on Jules Kounde. Let's finish off speaking about Callum Hudson-Odoi. I have a bit to say about Callum. I know a lot of people do. The frustrating thing about the Callum Hudson-Odoi situation is nothing has changed in 12 months for him at Chelsea, really. He had nice moments under Lampard in the early part of last season. He had a nice run when Tuchel arrived. But it's quite telling that once again he finds himself at the back end of a transfer window with his future in question at Stamford Bridge. And I personally came to the conclusion it wasn't reactionary just based on no minutes in the first 3 games. I think it's a lot of things for me why I felt that Callum needed a loan move. Just looking at the trends at Chelsea so far in his career, him never being first choice, the fact that Tuchel is most likely to play him out of position at right wing back, the amazing opportunity to go to Borussia Dortmund was there. I felt it could have been a great move for his development that could significantly improve where he is as a player, and I think maybe open the eyes to the talent he has. You know, the problem I have when assessing Callum Hudson-Odoi and his talent is I can't properly assess it because he just hasn't ever had enough minutes in the first team to properly judge his quality. People who've watched him from a very early age think he is a gem of a player. I think he is going to turn into one of Europe's best wide players, best attackers. But at the moment, we can't really judge that because he's never had the time at Chelsea. And it just becomes a little bit baffling to me with Callum, his situation at Chelsea. Chelsea committing to a big contract in 2019. Chelsea then subsequently, or even before that contract, buying players in his position, his preferred position, for a lot of money. Young players, Christian Pulisic for 60 million, Timo Werner for 45 million. Now, this is not me saying that either of those transfers shouldn't have happened. It's just looking at the wider picture and the individual that Callum Hudson-Odoi is and the situation he currently is at Chelsea, and asking what's best for his individual career. And I think this is the frustrating thing when discussing Callum, especially on social media, is when I bring up his lack of minutes, people are like, why are you making a problem out of anything? What, you going to play him over Mason Mount or Kai Havertz? I'm not. But I think it's about separating what's best for Chelsea, what Tuchel wants to use with the squad. I absolutely understand why Thomas Tuchel wants to keep Callum, because I think he's a very, very good player to have in rotation. But for Callum Hudson-Odoi, I think his own situation, how he's going to progress over the next 9 to 12 months as a player, I don't think if the current trend at Chelsea continues, where at most he gets run-outs in the League Cup games, a few Champions League games, but nearly all of those are out of position now under Tuchel at right wing back, how much is he going to progress over the next 12 months? How are we going to be sat here in 12 months having the same conversation about Callum? And I just think a player, even though he is still young, needs to, I think, take control a little bit more. And I think there needs to be significant improvement. Because the issue I think Callum has is when he gets a chance in the team, he has to play at an 11 out of 10 to impress people. And the issue is when you're not playing that consistently and you still are a young player finding your feet, finding out what you do in your career, or just, having that experience and having those hardships that the likes of Trevor Chalobah, going on loan several times, has had. Mason Mount, Fikayo Tomori, Tammy Abraham, Reece James. These were all players who had a lot of first-team football before arriving at Chelsea, and it's a shame that Callum hasn't been able to have those opportunities, but it's the place he finds himself in. As to why I felt a loan would be best individually for him to become the player I think many people think he can be. And I just worry for his own development this year with the amount of competition. I don't even think he's second choice right wing back. I think it's more likely that Dave plays there for Tuchel and Trevor Chalobah now plays at right centre back if we're looking at the Aston Villa game post the international break. And I can understand why Callum would want the Borussia Dortmund move. I don't think there's a better place in European football where Europe's brightest young attackers develop, being able to play alongside Erling Haaland, being able to play with Jude Bellingham, another bright English talent that Chelsea have been linked with. If his minutes don't radically improve, if the situation doesn't radically improve, and the likes of Timo Werner, Christian Pulisic, Hakim Ziyech are all still getting minutes over him, which I think is likely at the moment, he will have to reassess things, and I think there needs to be some difficult conversations had, and it's just confusing, and I think it's just a little bit frustrating as a supporter to have these similar conversations and not feel like with Callum, who I do think has a lot of talent. And on the channel before, we have discussed some of the stats, the underlying numbers of him last season, despite having limited time. In particular, I remember picking out a stat of his final third passing, in terms of key passes, I think it was in the final third. And him being up there with the likes of Jack Grealish, Bruno Fernandes and Kevin De Bruyne, players who are massive players for their clubs. And I think it just shows you what potential is there for Callum Hudson-Odoi, whether he's ever going to get it at Chelsea, and whether it's what's best for Chelsea, whether you think he should be in the front three, whether he deserves to start, I think is irrelevant to the conversation when we're just sort of isolating it down to what Callum Hudson-Odoi, the player, needs. I don't think just being a backup this season is going to do much for his development, sadly, at Stamford Bridge. Those are my opinions. I could be reactionary. We know things in football can radically change. And this is not having a go at Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel wants to win at Chelsea. He's going to play his best players on a regular basis, or the players he feels he needs to win football matches. And at the moment, the best front three is Kai Havertz, Mason Mount and Romelu Lukaku. I think that's going to be, for the majority of the time, our strongest front three. Hakim Ziyech had a really good pre-season. Christian Pulisic has talent. Timo Werner has talent. My general point is, what's the point of keeping Callum around if he's never going to get the game time required to develop him into the attacker that Chelsea and a big coach like Tuchel would trust on a weekly basis? So those are my thoughts on Callum. It's quite a complex situation. I hope for his sake it changes, but I'm not quite sure it will this season, and that's why I think we had so many debates in the remaining days of the window. His loan move being blocked, I think it told you a lot, the quality of club coming in for him on loan or permanent. I think it shows you how people in the game feel about Callum Hudson-Odoi. So we'll see what happens with Callum, but those are my thoughts on it. That is it for today's edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you don't miss any of the uploads on the channel. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.